You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show. The preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. It's Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. There you go, folks. Welcome to Big Show. We certainly appreciate it. We're our family and friends, as always, being part of our favorite show and our audience. We certainly love you, and we couldn't do it without you. So there you go. We have an amazing author who's joining us on the show. I think you're going to like her story and her life and her journey and how she's overcome it to lift herself up and be a better person. Now she shares it with everybody else in the world. But until we get to her, as always, we ask just one thing, one simple thing. That's all we want. It's not a cult, but we don't want 10% of your earnings. We don't want your firstborn. Your secondborn, I don't know. Send us pictures. Let's see if they're any good looking. But no, if they have talent, like, I don't know, skills in computers or something. But because we need more of those, or they're good at gaming. So I need somebody to win my raids for me. But in the meantime, refer the show to your family, friends, and relatives. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, YouTube.com/Chris Voss, and the tickety-tockety at Chris Voss 1. She's the author of the newest book that came out September 16th, 2023, Balance of Power, the Chosen Path series. And Krystal B. Clark is the author. She joins us on the show today. And we're going to talk about her story, her life. I believe she also does some coaching, life coaching services, and different advice that she helps people as well. So she's a fantasy author. And we're getting into all the great stuff about her life. She made the career move that went into becoming an author. Her book, Balance of Power, is the first in the Chosen Path series, is an epic spiritual fantasy. She spent most of her professional life in IT, solving data problems, providing insights, and selling work for and to large corporations. This is great because it paid well, but there wasn't a lot of passion, and yet she was successful. And now I think she's found her passion in writing books and sharing her story with the world and improving the quality of it. Thanks for joining us, Krystal. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. It's an awesome intro. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Well, it's your intro. I didn't do it. It's, it was your life. So there you go. Congratulations on the new book. Give us a .com. So where do you want people to find you on the interwebs?
Sure thing. You could get me on my website, movingwithmeaning.com. You can also check me out on YouTube on Moving with Meaning as well. I'm also on Tickety Talk at Krystal B. Clark with the K, and Instagram at Moving with Meaning 82.
There you go. So give us a 30,000 overview of the book and what's inside. I mean, don't give us all the details because then, it's a novel, so we can't give away everything.
Certainly. So I guess part of my book really is my life in every piece of my characters, as well as even in the plots. But at its very core, it's essentially the inner struggle that we have day to day. And that what I think about, first and foremost, I love fantasy, everything fantasy. So what I did find lacking in a lot of fantasy books was character development, because there's a lot of internal turmoil that makes us go different ways, choose different decisions, and so on and so forth. And we don't dig into that a lot and how much that really impacts the story. And so that's kind of what happened is as I was writing, I realized I was telling my story throughout all these characters, and it just took a life out of it on its own.
Stories are the great owner's manual to life, is what I always say. So tell us a little about your journey, because I know that it's a journey that plays into this, as you mentioned, and developed into your book.
Sure. So I'm going to take you guys on a tale of self-worth, or rather the lack thereof. So I found that after telling my story, it was basically both entertaining and the only other word I could think of is engorging.
Mm.
And that's because there's a lot of interpretation of what I envisioned my life to be versus how it turned out and what I did with all that experience.
Mhm.
So I think it's best to kind of like guess start with the end first. And I guess you're going to be like, well, who does that and not spoil the story? Well, as you
Yeah.
said,
It's
I'm
always a
current.
developing story, so, it never
Yeah,
really ends. Well, I
there
guess
you
there's a point that
go.
it ends, but yeah.
Yes,
So
yes,
you
love
you
it.
might be starting in the middle for all we know.
Yeah, true that, true that. As you said, I'm currently an author, a life coach, blogger, and podcaster, and I'm great in IT and all that great stuff. And I always seem to keep a toe in IT for some reason, whatever it is. But every other day, I'm doing what I love, which is telling stories and coaching others in their own career and mental health journeys. Uh, so in a way, my spiritual fantasy genre is literally the manifestation of my life told in various characters and plots.
Oh, wow.
So before my whole world came crashing down, I wanted to get married and have 6 kids. That was the
6 kids?
yes,
Wow.
yes.
Well, there's
Ev-
still time if you haven't done it yet.
no, no,
Where are
we're
you at
done.
now? How many you up to?
I'm at 3,
Okay,
and
so
let me tell you, if I had the last one first, I would have stopped. So
well, the last one's gonna be his own for her own her him her or him form of birth control.
yes, it
Kids
is.
kids are kind of a form of birth control when you really think about it.
They'll do it to you. They'll do it
Yeah,
to you.
yeah.
But you
I
know what? I
I
haven't really
dated,
felt
when I was in high school. Sorry, I had to cut
oh,
you
yeah,
off.
go
I just
ahead.
had to get
Oh,
this joke
please.
in. When I was in high school, I dated a gal, and she said, "I'm having 12 kids." And years later, I met her and I said, "How'd that 12 kids thing work out?" I look at the horror on your face. Um, and I said, we said to her, "How'd that 12 kids thing work out?" And she goes, "Oh, I ain't doing that." And I'm like, "What happened?" She says, "I saw a video of what it looks like to give birth." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, there you go." So sorry to
My
interrupt you
daughter's there.
there.
Nope, my daughter's right there with her, and I told her, I was like, "Just consider please." I want grandkids so bad, but yeah, I think she's doing the same thing.
I did too. I haven't had any kids because I saw what birth was like. I'm not doing that. So back to where I interrupted you. My apologies.
No worries. So I hadn't really thought much past that, right? That was the
Mhm.
vision, and that's all I needed to do. So how I how I was gonna afford all of that wasn't a concern, nor was the effort of raising kids. Your parents always make it look so easy, and they never really talk about what it ain't.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So as far as my life, a lot of it really was about being worthy of someone.
Mm.
So like my parents, my brother, etc. I think of it like this: if you are a betting person, put your money on me because
Mhm.
I'm a good bet. I'm a good bet. You could never lose, and I never felt that anyone was willing to do that.
Oh,
So
wow.
I always had to prove myself, and clearly I had to make some tough decisions, and it just sometimes it was just for other people. It's always easier to blame me, the one
Mhm.
that's clear-headed, the one that's grounded, rooted, and clearly I was always at fault.
Mhm.
So let me take you into that whole reason. So as a child, you really look to your parents, right, as heroes. And I always had this feeling that they would never choose me. Okay.
Hmm.
I felt like I was being being raised to be Atlas. Okay. Like I'm carrying,
Wow.
yeah, the world on my shoulders. So they raised me to be very independent. And someone recently told me on my podcast, without emotional intelligence. So I couldn't really express my emotion to my parents. So I had to
Mhm.
write them down. So that's where I found my passion for writing, drawing, and all that. So as I was growing up, and I was really young, I was molested by a
Oh,
family
no.
member. Yeah, and it was another. This person was 2 years younger than me. It was a cousin, and so that held a lot of shame. But the thing about this was my mom had always told me, "Don't ever let anyone do that." And the mistake she made in that was that she started listing out, okay, it could be like these kind of people could do that. She
Mhm.
left out a family member could do it.
Wow.
So children latch onto these things, right? And so
Mhm.
I latched onto the fact that, hey, this is a kid for one, and two, it's a family member. That's not in the list you told me, mom. So I immediately became shameful, and
Mhm.
I held it in for quite some time.
Mhm.
Um, I, basically fast forward to ninth grade, I finally told her what was going on, and he was living with us by this time.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so it was, and that's what happened is that I got scared. He was growing bolder. And what they did was and it's interesting because they remember it differently than I do. And I'm kind of like, I know this for a fact. This
Well, I
happened
mean,
before.
that it's your experience. It's not theirs.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yes.
always find that interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they asked me after I told them, they asked me, well, what do you want to do? And I'm looking like, what do you mean? What do I want to do? They're like, well, do you want them to stay or you want them to go? And I'm kind of like, something about me as a parent, and I'm like, I would never ask my child that. The child or the person, whoever did that, would be lucky to be living, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So I immediately at that point, I said, see, you're not choosing me. You're not choosing me.
Ah,
So,
I kind of
so
see the math there. Yeah.
there, yeah.
Yeah.
So anyhow, I went off to college, and the when someone abuses you
Mhm.
like that sexually, they kind of take something from you. They take a lot of
They do.
innocence from you, and they take wanting to explore this with others. So I
Mhm.
became very intimately uncomfortable. So anyhow, I ended up getting pregnant in college,
Mhm.
and I really wanted to keep the baby. I didn't have an issue with keeping the child, but a friend of mine, I was like, "Oh yeah, my parents went with me, and we were trying to, have this talk." And she was like, "You told your parents?" And I said, "Well, yeah, they were going to have to pay for it. I didn't have, I didn't have any money." so, but I said, but it wasn't all of that. It was, I said, "Guys, I can do this." And my dad perception was, well, if you have the baby, everything that you're working towards to your career and everything, you can kiss it goodbye.
Wow.
My mom says, no man's going to want you with another child. And they really do not remember this to this day, telling me this. And so that's why I went forward with the abortion.
Wow.
And listen, this is something that you chase
Mhm.
because that's a decision that you can't get back. And I
Mhm.
live with this daily that I regret.
Really?
Yeah, I really regret that. And so that all plays again into my
Into the
book.
book.
It does.
There you go.
So the next thing happened is as all of this was happening, I started coping
Mhm.
with these emotions because remember I can't express them. So I started to drink. So I became an
Oh.
alcoholic.
Mhm.
And when I tell you I was an alcoholic, I could put them down, and I was drinking people who were double, triple my size under the table. I could outdrink everyone.
Wow.
And yeah, so what ended up happening though, I became depressed with this.
Yeah, that'll do it.
And what ended up happening is I started to plan my suicide, but I didn't know that I was planning my suicide.
Wow.
It was weird. So what happened is remember I told you I was going to get married and I was going to have these
6
kids.
kids. Yeah.
I stopped seeing past my wedding day.
Mhm.
So you know how people can see their future or you just imagine what things could be. I don't see past the next few minutes. I don't see past that far.
Mhm.
So at this point, I stopped seeing past the day I got married. And for some reason, that age was 23. I don't know where that age came out. It was just 23, which it wasn't, but I was like, "Oh, 23 is when I'm getting married," or what have
Okay.
you. Yeah. So what ended up happening, so at that point I would like not have any kids, so I wouldn't. So that no longer became in sight. That was gone. That part of my life started to diminish. Right.
Uh-huh.
So then, and I ended up kind of having started to waver in faith because my body started to reject alcohol.
Yeah.
And what a lot of people understand, when people take drugs, they call it chasing the dragon.
Yeah.
And again, on my podcast, I just love it because these guys are so insightful. You're really running. You're not chasing anything. You're running from your
You're running
demon.
from the dragon?
Yes. And so it was like I
That's
was like,
Fridays
"Oh
around
my
here.
god." Yeah. So you know what? I stopped drinking, or my body started rejecting it. Like I couldn't smell it. I would get sick, and
Hmm.
I remember crying because I am extremely faith based. But I remember crying and to asking God, like, why would you take this from me? You took everything else, everything. A child that I could have had. You've taken a lot of my innocence away. Everything. This is the one thing that was letting me live, and you're taking this. And what ended up happening, so here's the thing, and this is crazy, and I shouldn't be laughing because you're probably wondering why I'm laughing, but I
Well, that's the
met
perspective I think we get when we look back, and
yeah,
it put into perspective, right? It seems like hell and cathartic at the time, and now we can kind of look back. You know what they always say: someday you'll look back on this and laugh, and you're like, really, this is hell.
yeah, yes.
Yeah. But, but you get
So
older, and you're like, yeah, I lived.
yeah, you're right,
Yeah.
and that's the part of the story, you
Yeah.
can get through that. But in the midst of me kind of rejecting my body rejecting this, I met my husband in
Oh.
college. And he is also emotionally withdrawn, so it's like two negatives coming together. But
Well, at
but
least you
he
don't fight
was
much or something. I don't know. Maybe does it work out that way?
no, yeah, well, yeah, you know what? We don't fight much.
That's too bad. That sounds like a
Yeah,
unhealthy marriage.
but once we do, it's like,
Oh, all
what are
right.
we talking about right now? Because we don't we're working through it. Okay,
We're working
trust me.
through it. There you
Yeah, yeah. But
go.
he was really handy with the drill. So
Hmm.
So to me, I hit the jackpot. So when I say
Yeah.
a drill, I mean he's handy. Like,
Yeah. I mean, that's why
okay,
most women marry men. Um, let me ask you this: when he married you? I had to get that joke in there. It's very on the sly. I don't know what it means. But when he married you, did you tell him you wanted to have 6 kids?
I told him before.
Ah,
Yes, I
and he
did.
still married you. Well, that's good.
Yes.
That's good
Well,
to
he
know.
married when I told him that, he was like, I was thinking maybe two. And I was like, nope, it's got to be six or we're not going to make it. And he's like, can we meet in the he negotiated with me
Uh,
so we were planning on four.
mm.
When three came, I said, no, we can't. I can't
See,
do
men
another
know
one.
this stuff. They know reality. Yeah, I knew
So
it was gonna.
this, I mean, listen, I was so attracted to my husband that I thought I was like out of his league. Like
Mm,
that's how attracted to him I was.
mm.
And what's kind of creepy was no, I wasn't. I was exactly his type, like from a physical characteristic perspective. And I know this because when I went to visit his house, he still had like a prom picture up of it with him and his prom date. And that girl looked like me. And I was like,
Wow. Yeah.
okay, okay.
Now, is it
I know.
bad to have your prom date on your wall? I'm just
Yes,
asking for a
it
friend.
was. It was. And he
Oh,
took it down. So I was, because I'm like,
note
what
to
we,
self: I should probably take down that picture of
hmm
my prom date.
yeah, we're looking, we're
That would
paying
be
attention.
weird. But I mean,
So,
I'm not shaming. I'm just thinking, being funny.
so this put me in a precarious position, right? Because here I am about to marry the man of my dreams, but make him a widower within 2 months of our marriage.
A widower,
Yeah, because I was still planning
because you
my
were still
suicide.
really okay. So
Yeah.
I see now. You weren't planning past your marriage, and okay. Yeah.
Yep.
And so you're
Yep.
dealing with depression. Do you know you were dealing with depression at the time?
No, no, I didn't. He didn't know a lot. I didn't, like I said, we were emotionally withdrawn, so I didn't share.
I
I
shouldn't
was
laugh.
it was just because 'cause you're embarrassed. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want him to know that, and then run away. That's all I would think. I wouldn't think he would be like, "Oh, that sucks." Like, "Where is he?" Which is what he was. But, because that's what happened. Everyone was always
Hmm.
abandoning me. And so then you might wanna ask, "Well, why are you waiting till after you marry?"
Yeah.
Why
Why
didn't
are
you
you
know?
waiting till after you marry? See, you set me up on that one.
Yeah.
There you
So, my dad would always talk about walking me down the aisle.
go. Uh-huh.
So I figured I didn't want to let me give him that. I didn't want to take that away from him. And then once that happened, I was like, okay, checking out, right? So on the honeymoon, I got pregnant. So that threw a
Wow.
wrench in things, right?
Yeah.
And
It
and I
happens
keep
a lot. I hear they figured out what goes on that does it. Evidently, I think there's science behind it.
you know what? Me and my husband were incredibly surprised by this because listen,
You're
listen.
surprised it's the honeymoon. I mean, there's things that go on during that time that cause
Well,
these things.
we were not careful at all while we were dating. Let me just
Well,
say,
so
read
this
between
whole
the lines.
there you go. Plus, it's it's the whole point of being married.
Yeah,
You don't need to wear protection anymore or something. I hear. I don't know.
listen. We were
I've read
dating.
things.
Listen, we were just buck wild, and then nothing
This should be
happened.
the
And
name of your next book.
buck wild, yeah, that
Yeah.
might be, yeah. So anyhow, so I couldn't do it, right? So I had to, because now I have a child, which is now going to love me unconditionally. So we'll go ahead and fast forward through like the Great Recession. We kind of went through some homelessness, and now we're three kids into this thing. All right.
Hmm.
So I ended up making a great career in IT. And, I mean, I was traveling and doing all kinds of things, speaking to large gatherings and so on. So there was, and this was a point of time where I think I had a lot of personal growth because nothing prepares you for the mental and emotional strain working in a corporate environment does. And I think a lot of people try to write books about it. There's not one there that's going to help you react to people betraying you, people taking credit for your work, just all of these things. So I had to really, because I was an introvert, so I had to come out of my box and be warm and welcoming, and because yeah, no one works well with someone who's really cold and closed off. I had to learn to pick my battles and how to not take things personally. I had to learn to ask for help. That was hard, again, because people, like, I didn't ask for help much. So when I would do it, people didn't immediately give it to me. So I would have
Mm.
to, like, go back and do it. It was like they didn't believe me. So I would have to do it more than once. And I had to get used to asking for help and,
Hmm.
not feeling shamed about it.
Hmm.
Um, then there were times where I had to fake the funk, when you're leading a team and there's
Fake
so
the funk.
much,
Yeah.
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 And there's these politics that are happening above your head with the leadership, and you can't let your team know because then it'll be demoralizing to them,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So think of being, how you in the government or having the multiple roles. You can't freak your people out. So you have to keep them in a performing and a productive way. And that
Hmm.
plague that hurts you inside because you're lying to them.
Oh.
So before I knew it, I was leading in so many areas. And then I realized like a lot of my coworkers were calling me
Hmm.
randomly, either to vent, and then they would be like, well, what do you think I should do? And I had to be really careful because people handle situations differently and they move at different paces.
Yeah.
And so if I could be like, I tell you what I do, and it's like, no, that's not what you would do. So I end up basically donning my IT analysis hat and basically started asking them, well, what do you want?
Hmm.
And then from there, it would take off. And after that, I just realized I'm starting to career coach people. And, before you do that, you have to build a relationship first. People aren't just going to come up to you and start telling you all this stuff
Hmm.
if you haven't developed some kind of rapport. So
Definitely.
I felt like as an introvert, I realized, wow, just being vulnerable allows people to come in and develop this sense of trust. So,
Hmm.
eventually I started to burn down in IT because I hated doing it.
What did you hate
Like
about it? I'm curious.
everything, like literally everything. I hated looking at
Everything.
data. Yeah, I hated looking at data. I hated people complaining about the data. I hated people like I hated all of this. I hated everything, it was like it's a bunch of whiny babies was what it felt like, and you just kind of almost roll like you will realize a lot of people who are in IT, the ones who are like developers,
Hmm.
that's why they're really closed off because they're like, ugh, like just leave it over there. Got it. Just let me, um, so you're hearing these people vent and you're like, I don't want to hear all that.
Hmm.
Um, and now to me, this is different than a burnout, right? Because it's a burn down,
Mm.
not a burnout.
Burned down.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
I was
that's
just
Fridays around here. We burn it down.
yeah, right? Because the next day I could stay doing IT for the rest of my life
Uh-huh.
and be just fine, you know. But I thought I am much more than fixing other people's data problems.
Sounds like a job that a pyro would really enjoy, a pyromaniac.
Maybe, I don't know. They may have the
Right. Let's check on
analytical
that.
capability.
Somebody look into that.
So I confided in my husband, and he said, why don't you finish your book? So
Mm.
here's the kicker. I started my book 20 years ago in college.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Yeah. And like I said, I got pregnant. I had to work. I mean, just stuff just started taking over.
Yeah.
So he was like, You should finish that. Why don't you do that? Because, maybe that'll take your mind off of a few things. So
Ah.
I said, Sure. Well, let me go ahead and do that. That's no problem. And so what I found out while I was writing, I was weaving all of my trauma, all of my thoughts, my experiences, in all the various roles that I've played throughout my life as a mother, as a wife, as a career woman, and all of these as a daughter, and so on. And
Mhm.
I was weaving them into all of my characters and my plot. And what do you know? That makes for a great story.
Yeah. The stories of life imprinted in the stories of, whatever it is, fiction or nonfiction, the collecting stories. I mean, we always say on the show, the stories are the owner's manual to life. And that's how we learn from each other. Stories,
Absolutely.
movies, TV, books, all these things that we enjoy that we kind of think is like, well, that's entertainment. No, there's things we learn. They're how we share each other. No one gets an owner's manual last time I checked, unless I was the only one who didn't get one. But stories are the way that we learn from each other. We learn about experiences, and we also it also helps us find out that we're not alone.
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
really important because some people, they can feel isolated. They can feel like, well, this only happens to me. And finding out you're not alone helps you find other people who've gone through what you've gone through and maybe got over it and or passed through it and healed. And you can find out how they healed and heal yourself. So it's the beauty of stories. And that's why we
Absolutely.
do the Chris Voss show.
Yes. Yes.
That's what we're
Amen.
about.
You know
So,
what?
mm,
I want to add a little piece to that,
mhm,
because I my podcast is Moving with Meaning, the
mhm,
podcast, and one of my members said, one of my guests said something very similar to what you said.
mhm,
It's the isolation and the secret that binds us. That's
mhm.
what keeps us in a depressive state. And
Yeah.
once you tell someone, it's out. It can no
Yeah.
longer hold you. So I just
The
wanted to
poison
bring that up.
inside, if you hold it inside, will kill you. It's like having a snake bite of poison putting inside
Mm,
your radioactive rock in your
yeah.
belly, and if you leave it there, it will just tear you up, it'll destroy you, and it'll be like a poison. So you've gotta let it out. You've gotta bleed it out like you would bleed out a snake bite.
Absolutely.
I guess you'd have to poop out the radioactive thing if you put it in your stomach, but, that's your problem. Um, the but no, you've gotta let that poison out and share it, and that then usually you find other people in the world that are like, "Hey, that happened to me too," or, you search at other people, and finding out you're not alone, that's the problem with, you talked about suicide, wanting to commit suicide.
Yep.
There's people that, they think they're alone. They think this is, they're isolated, and, they think that if they end it, it'll get better, and there's so many people who have gone through that, that can give them the tools that they use to get out of it and stories of those tools. So you
Yeah.
you incorporate these, you lead them into your book. Tell us about more about the book and what goes into it.
Sure. So it's a spiritual fantasy.
Hmm.
Okay. So if you want to think of it as from two perspectives, a spiritual aspect is with the faith of a mustard seed. So if we all had the faith of a mustard seed, what that is, what that means, or
What if I eat
two,
a lot of mustard seeds? I love
no,
mustard. Is
no, no,
that the same thing? Okay.
no, no.
All right.
And then the second part of that is, what if we use our entire brain capacity? So kind of like phenomenon with John
Ah,
Travolta, but without the tumor. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. And so that's kind of what it is. And so they're able to basically do things supernaturally.
Mm,
Different people are able to do supernaturally based on their belief
mm,
in something. And so it's basically it's a tale that basically talks about our cultures, various
mm,
different cultures, and how we are all fighting for the same thing,
mm,
but we have different principles that we believe in,
mm,
and that basically kind of push and pulls in the balance, if you will, of power.
mm.
And so we talk about that, and or the characters go through that, but it's very much with the fantasy tropes of swords and um, cloaks and all that good stuff. But
Kind of
it's
medievalish, or that whole sort of Tolkien sort of fantasy settings.
Tolkien, I would say
Okay.
that. Not
Hmm.
medieval. Someone when I was doing
Okay.
a book cover, that's what they were asking. Like, how does it? I was like, I don't know. It's like Egyptian,
Okay.
like yeah. If you think of it that way, it's not
Hmm.
castles and stuff, but
Hmm.
it's very Star Warsy. Yeah, my daughter describes it as Hunger Games meets Game of Thrones and all
Mm.
that stuff. Cause see how in Game of Thrones, if we went to different places, they don't look the same.
Yeah.
Right, and they operate differently. It's
Hmm.
very similar to that, and so we weave all of these things in, and you have all these plots, suspicion, and tons of cliffhangers. I mean, it's as I was writing it, I was just like, "Oh my god, this is," you know, I was just engaged into it. So it's a good read. Y'all
There
need
you
to read
go.
it. Y'all need
The
to get on
balance
it
of
and
power, or balance of power, I should say. The Chosen Path series. Now, is this? Do you have some other books you're cooking right now? Are you working on?
absolutely.
Hmm.
I am working on two other books. One is the sequel to the Balance of Power, book two in the Chosen Path series, and the second one is my memoir, which basically tell is basically my story in how my world in consulting developed my personal growth,
Mm.
and that's how I present myself as a life coach.
Oh, there you
And
go.
it's one of the things that this one manager told me. He told me perception is reality. And I
Mm.
was like, okay, noted, and that's the truth. I mean, and so one of the first chapter in that memoir is the truth doesn't matter. That's what
Mm.
it's so I'm gonna leave you with that little tidbit because it's a great book. It's a
Yeah,
great memoir.
definitely.
Yeah.
Most definitely. And I noticed that the Chosen evidently is a child.
Yes. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, yeah, based on there is, so basically, um, we've evolved. So this is basically dystopian post-apocalyptic. So
Mm.
we have gotten too greedy and too big, too powerful,
Ah,
that we've basically destroyed the world because of that.
I've
Right.
seen that movie. It seems to be coming the way we're going with AI and stuff. So there
There
you
you
go.
go.
There you
Yes.
go.
So we've
Mm.
destroyed ourselves, and nature has basically reclaimed the earth again. Well, I'm,
Ah,
I'm saying earth, but this is a different place, okay?
okay.
A dimension. So I
Mm.
bring dimensionality into that, right? Because I love Marvel. Okay, we talked about Doctor Strange and the different versions of Spider-Man. All that is in
Hmm.
there, baby. It's good. But yeah, so the Great Spirit basically sends a child, and this child, based on whatever society claims the child, finds the child and raises them up in their ways, can shift the world into push it forward or they could drive it backwards, right? And so in this particular scenario, when one child dies, another one is born with this particular type of spirit, and they have to go find it.
Oh,
And
wow.
so when they find this particular child, I'll just throw a little snippet in there. They don't find one, they find two.
Ah,
So who is the chosen? We don't know.
wow. We do that on Fridays around here. We play the game.
Friday is a
Who's the
good day.
chosen? Spin the tail on the donkey, I think is how we kill. I don't know what that means, but there's a lot of vodka involved. So this sounds really interesting, and it goes through and you've incorporated a lot of your life into it, and there's a lot of lessons I think that you probably learned or taught yourself, or maybe experienced, and this is the power of stories in life. You get to put them into a book, and without your life's journey, you might not have a book.
Yes. That's
Yeah,
exactly what one of my ARC readers said. I said, "I
yeah.
know I should have wrote this 20 years ago." And she said, "No."
No, because you wouldn't know the story. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. She said
It's
she said, "I know you. I know you through this book. I know you
wow.
now."
Wow,
Yeah.
that is super powerful.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about your life coaching too, because we don't want to give away the middle or the end of the book. We want to give people a good tease out. What do you do in your life coaching thing that helps people?
So, here's what's interesting. I was giving these people were calling me, and and I'm giving all this advice out, and then I found out like people actually get paid for this. So
People
I'm
pay
like,
for my
I've been,
advice?
yeah. So
Yeah,
I'm
I had
like,
that experience
oh,
too.
oh, did you?
Yeah, I was like, you pay me for this stupid shit that I'm doing? All right, fine.
Right. So yeah, so I do specifically career coaching and mental health coaching.
Ah,
Yeah. So I help folks. A lot of people. Well, I can just tell you what they do is they'll give me a call on the discovery, and what we'll do is we'll develop a nice rapport, and we'll talk about basically they're either trying to choose from a career perspective. They're trying to choose whether they should stay in their current um, position or company, or should they leave,
mm,
right? And so what I do is, and it's not like therapy. What I do is I just ask questions,
mm,
right? And I just basically, well, why do you feel this way?
mm,
What's making you do something? And the first question that I always or I always the first statement that I always say is, you want to make sure that when you are decide making these decisions, is you want to make sure that you are running towards something and not running away from something.
mm,
And so that's where a lot of the strength of my coaching comes from, because I'm always speaking to them as to, one, don't don't try to do this overnight. It doesn't go that way. And two, make sure you're running towards something. You're not running
mm,
away. So we make we make decisions really emotionally,
mm,
and I try to basically kind of bring that take the emotion out of it and add the logic into it. And so we really, and through that they find, one, yeah, I was emotional. I shouldn't have done
mm,
that. Or yeah, so we just kind of help do this. And so what we do is we meet once a month, we have this discussion. They come up with their own action items. And then I would meet with them, depending on what package they have, either a week later or a month later, and we discuss the progress on that.
mm.
The kicker on that is that I was like, I could go and say, hey, so how are we dealing with that? They may say, yeah, I don't want to talk about that today. Today, I want to talk about this. So
That's funny coaching people.
yeah, yeah. So then you have to be adaptable to say, okay, well then let's talk about that, because that could
Mm,
kind of that's a fallout, right? Or that may be
mm,
something that's on their mind for the day, and they want the help to figure that out. They want the help. They like deciding and making these decisions on their own, and they don't realize that they have it in them.
mm.
So I help that. I help them with that.
There you go. And so people can onboard with you. They reach out to you. You do a test call with them, or I forget what they call it.
Discovery.
Discovery call. There you
Yeah.
go. And all that good stuff. I see on your website too. You have the Chose Your. You have coming soon 2 books: the Chose Your Path series and Perception is Reality. Coming. So, what's it like writing? Are you writing the 2 books at the same time?
Yes, I am. So part of on my website that I will be starting to post about is, it's not there yet, but it's an author's corner. But it's how I share my writing style and my
Hmm.
writing technique. And so what I do is I outline. So as long as I have an outline, I can write, because I will never lose what my mind was, the thought that was the path that I was going on. So it's almost like a research paper. You remember how we had to write research papers back in
Yeah. Yeah.
that's really what I do. So I outline my memoir, and I outline my chosen path book, and I just dedicate different times to them.
There
And
you
I'm
go.
passionate about both of them, so it's not a problem. I could finish them if I wasn't doing so much promoting, they would be done by now.
Well, you got to do the promoting part and get it out to
Yep.
people and all that good stuff. So this has been fascinating, Krystal. Give us a final pitch on everything you do, the podcast, your coaching, the book. Give us the final pitch out as we go out.
Sure. Well, ever since I've been writing and doing my podcasts and creating content, I've been connecting with people more and more. And I really didn't think that I was that interesting, but I'm starting to see why now.
Mhm.
And if anything, there is a lot that you can take within yourself through not only through my story, but reading this book, it will take you on your own journey.
Mm,
And that is the only thing that I desire for everyone who reads the book. It's not reading me. Hopefully you get to know me, but it's about what you take from it as well.
there you go. The stories that we learn and the lessons we learn from each other. Thank you so much for coming on, Krystal. It's been a lot of fun having you and very insightful.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris. I
Thank
appreciate you.
you. Give us the .coms one more time so people can check those out.
Sure thing. It's movingwithmeaning.com.
Mhm.
Uh, and then TikTok at Crystal B. Clark. That's Krystal B.
There
Clark.
there you go.
And Instagram at Moving with Meaning 82.
Okay. Order it up, folks, wherever fine books are sold. It's called Balance of Power, the Chosen Path series, available September 16th, 2023. Thanks to Krystal for coming on the show. Thanks to our audience for being here. As always, refer the show to your family, friends, and relatives, or else. No, I don't. It's not like that, people. We just teasing you. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Foss, youtube.com/Chris Foss, linkedin.com/Chris Foss. Subscribe to the LinkedIn newsletter and go to Chris Foss One on the Tickety Talkity over there. Thanks, Amonis, for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe, and we'll see you guys next time.